The WTA is in full crisis mode. Sponsors are pulling out, executives are scrambling, and at the center of it all is a leaked video involving one of tennis's brightest young stars, Eala. What started as a private moment has exploded into a public relations nightmare that's threatening the very foundation of women's tennis. Careers are on the line, millions of dollars are vanishing, and the question everyone's asking is, how did it come to this? Eala wasn't just another name on the WTA roster. She was a symbol, a beacon of hope for an entire nation, and a generation of young players who saw themselves in her story. Born in the Philippines, Eala had dreams that extended far beyond the courts of Manila. She trained at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain, grinding through junior tournaments with a work ethic that caught the attention of coaches and scouts worldwide. By the time she turned professional, the tennis world was watching. Her rise was meteoric. Grand Slam junior titles, a US Open Girls Singles Championship. Then came the transition to the professional circuit, where she didn't just survive, she thrived. Eala's playing style was aggressive, fearless, and electric. She brought energy to every match, a fire that reminded fans why they fell in love with tennis in the first place. But it wasn't just her game that captivated audiences, it was her story. The Philippines had never produced a tennis star quite like her. She wasn't just playing for herself, she was carrying the hopes of millions. Every win was celebrated across social media. Every loss was met with unwavering support. Eala became more than an athlete. She became a cultural icon. Brands noticed. Sponsorship deals rolled in. Nike, Yonex, major Philippine corporations, they all wanted a piece of the Eala phenomenon. The WTA embraced her too. She was the perfect ambassador for their vision of global expansion. Young, talented, marketable, and relatable, she represented diversity in a sport that had often been criticized for lacking it. Tournament organizers featured her prominently in promotional campaigns. Media outlets wrote glowing profiles. She was on the cover of magazines, invited to exclusive events, and positioned as the future face of women's tennis. But with that spotlight came pressure. Immense, unrelenting pressure. Eala was expected to win, to inspire, to be perfect, both on and off the court. She handled it with grace, at least publicly. In interviews, she spoke about her love for the game, her gratitude for the support, and her commitment to representing her country with pride. Behind the scenes, though, the reality was more complicated. The travel was exhausting. The expectations were suffocating. The scrutiny was constant. Every outfit she wore, every person she was seen with, every social media post, it was all analyzed, critiqued, and dissected by fans and critics alike. Eala was living in a glass house, and the world was watching her every move. Still, she pushed forward. She believed in the dream, she believed in the work, and she believed that as long as she stayed true to herself, everything would be okay. But in today's world, staying true to yourself isn't always enough. Sometimes, one moment, one mistake, one misunderstanding, one leaked video can change everything. And for Eala, that moment was coming. What was in that video? And why would it cause an entire organization to spiral into chaos? Keep watching, because what happens next will shock you. It started with a notification, then another, and another. Within hours, Eala's phone was loaded with messages from friends, family, teammates, and strangers. A video had surfaced online, a video that was never meant to be seen by anyone outside her inner circle. And now, it was everywhere. The footage itself was grainy, clearly recorded without Eala's knowledge or consent. It showed her at a private gathering, off-season, away from the courts. There was nothing illegal about what was captured. No drugs, no violence, no criminal activity. But context didn't matter anymore. In the age of viral content, perception is reality, and the perception was damaging. The video showed Eala in a relaxed, unguarded moment, laughing, joking, using language that was casual and unfiltered. There were friends around her, people she trusted. Someone was smoking in the background. There was alcohol visible on a table. It was a normal scene for a young adult letting off steam after months of grueling competition. But for a public figure, for someone positioned as a role model, it was a PR disaster. Within 24 hours, the video had been viewed millions of times. It was shared on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Reddit. Fan pages posted it. Gossip sites wrote articles. Sports commentators debated it on television. The narrative quickly spiraled out of control. Some defended Eala, arguing that she was entitled to a private life and that the video was taken out of context. Others condemned her, claiming she had betrayed the values she was supposed to represent. The comment sections were brutal. Fans who once celebrated her every victory now questioned her character. Sponsors who had proudly displayed her face in advertisements began to reconsider their partnerships. And the WTA, the organization that had championed her as a rising star, suddenly found itself facing a problem it wasn't prepared to handle. But who leaked the video? That was the question everyone wanted answered. Speculation ran wild. Some believed it was a jealous competitor, or someone within her own camp seeking revenge or money. Others suggested it was hacked from a private cloud account. Theories spread like wildfire, each more dramatic than the last, but no one knew for sure. And in the absence of facts, rumors filled the void. Eala's team immediately went into crisis mode. Her agent released a brief statement expressing disappointment over the invasion of privacy and promising that legal action would be taken against whoever was responsible for the leak. Her family stayed silent, likely on the advice of lawyers and PR consultants. Eala herself disappeared from social media, deleting her most recent posts and going dark. But the silence only made things worse. In the vacuum left by her absence, the internet created its own narrative. Memes were made. Conspiracy theories flourished. Some fans even began to turn on each other, dividing into camps of defenders and critics. The tense community was fracturing, and at the center of it all was a 20-year-old woman who just wanted to play the sport she loved. The leak wasn't just a personal violation, it was a calculated attack. Whether intentional or opportunistic, it had achieved its goal. Eala's reputation was under siege, and the damage was only beginning. But here's where it gets even worse. The video wasn't just a problem for Eala. It was about to become a financial catastrophe for the WTA. Stay with me. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning. A major sportswear brand that had signed Eala to a multi-year endorsement deal released a statement. It was carefully worded, filled with corporate language about reassessing partnerships and aligning with brand values. But the message was clear. They were distancing themselves. Within 48 hours, two more sponsors followed. A luxury watch company, a health supplement brand. Both released similar statements. Both suspended their contracts pending further review. The financial implications were staggering. Eala stood to lose millions in endorsement income. But the real shock was yet to come. Because this wasn't just about Eala anymore. This was about the WTA. Several of the brands pulling out weren't just Eala sponsors. They were official WTA partners. They had invested heavily in women's tennis, funding tournaments, supporting player development programs, and financing marketing campaigns. But now they were questioning whether the WTA was the right partner for their brand image. Behind closed doors, executives were panicking. Conference calls stretched late into the night. Legal teams were consulted. PR firms were brought in. The WTA had spent years building relationships with these sponsors, convincing them that women's tennis was a stable, marketable investment. And now one leaked video threatened to unravel it all. The criticism was swift and brutal. Industry insiders began leaking information to the press. One anonymous WTA employee told a sports journalist that the organization was in full crisis mode, and that some executives were privately blaming Eala for the fallout. Another source claimed that certain board members had suggested suspending Eala from competition until the scandal died down. But the sponsors weren't just concerned about Eala. They were concerned about the WTA's response, or rather, the lack of one. Days had passed since the video surfaced, and the organization had issued no public statement, no support for Eala, no condemnation of the privacy violation, nothing. The silence was deafening. Fans noticed, tennis journalists noticed, and most importantly, the remaining sponsors noticed. If the WTA wasn't willing to stand by one of its own players during a crisis, what did that say about the organization as a whole? Trust was eroding. And in the world of corporate sponsorships, trust is everything. Some sponsors began to quietly renegotiate their contracts, inserting new clauses that would allow them to exit partnerships if certain PR thresholds were crossed. Others simply walked away, deciding that the risk wasn't worth the reward. The financial losses were mounting. Industry analysts estimated that the WTA could lose upwards of $50 million if the exodus continued. And it wasn't just about money. It was about credibility. The WTA had positioned itself as a progressive, player-focused organization. But now, in the eyes of many, it looked like a business more interested in protecting its bottom line than protecting its athletes. The hypocrisy was glaring. The WTA had celebrated Eala when she was winning, plastered her face on posters, and used her story to sell tickets. But the moment she became a liability, they vanished. The backlash was swift. Former players began speaking out on social media, criticizing the WTA's silence. Tennis commentators debated whether the organization had a moral obligation to defend Eala. Fans started online petitions demanding accountability. The narrative was shifting. This was no longer just about a leaked video. This was about institutional failure. And as the sponsors continued to fall, one question loomed larger than ever. Would the WTA finally speak up? Or would they let one of their brightest stars be sacrificed to save their reputation? The WTA's silence was deafening. But when they finally responded, it might have been better if they'd said nothing at all. You won't believe what happened next. When the WTA finally broke its silence, it was too little too late. A press release was issued, a single paragraph buried on their website, released late on a Friday afternoon when most people were offline. The statement was vague, expressing concern over the situation and emphasizing the organization's commitment to player welfare. But there was no mention of Alex Eala by name, no condemnation of the privacy violation, no promise of support or investigation. It felt like a slap in the face. The tennis community erupted. Journalists tore the statement apart, calling it cowardly and performative. Fans flooded social media with criticism, accusing the CIF of abandoning one of their own. Even some current players, who rarely speak out against the organization, began to express frustration. One anonymous player told a reporter, "If this can happen to Alex, it can happen to any of us. And now we know that WTA won't have our backs." But behind the scenes, the situation was even messier. Leaked emails began to surface, internal communications between WTA executives, that painted a damning picture of the organization's priority. In one email, a senior official suggested that the WTA should let this blow over and avoid making Eala the face of the controversy. Another email discussed the potential financial impact of publicly supporting her, weighing the cost of lost sponsors against the cost of damaged player relations. The emails revealed what many had suspected. The WTA was more concerned about protecting its brand than protecting its players. And when those emails went public, the outrage reached a fever pitch. Former WTA champion and current commentator Maria Sanchez didn't hold back. In a widely shared interview, she said, "This is exactly what's wrong with the system. They use these young players to sell the sport, to attract sponsors, to fill stadiums. But the moment something goes wrong, they're nowhere to be found." Alex deserved better. She deserved support. She deserved the truth. The backlash forced the WTA to respond again. This time, the CEO appeared in a video statement, carefully scripted and clearly rehearsed. She expressed sympathy for Eala and condemned the invasion of privacy. She spoke about the WTA's commitment to mental health and player welfare. She promised that the organization would review its policies and do better in the future, but the damage was done. The statement felt hollow, performative, and insincere. It didn't address the leaked emails. It didn't explain why the organization had waited so long to respond. And it didn't offer any concrete support for Eala. No legal assistance, no public defense, no reassurance that she would be protected moving forward. Critics pointed out that the WTA had been quick to issue statements on other controversies, political issues, social justice causes, even minor rule violations. But when one of their own players was being attacked, when her privacy was violated, and her career was on the line, they hesitated. The double standard was impossible to ignore. And then came the revelation that made everything worse. An investigative journalist uncovered documents showing that the WTA had been in negotiations with several sponsors even before the scandal broke. Some of those sponsors had expressed concerns about Eala's marketability, citing her age and the risks associated with young, unproven players. The implication was clear. The WTA had already been considering distancing themselves from Eala. The leaked video simply gave them an excuse. The tennis world was in shock. Was this all calculated? Had the WTA allowed Eala to be thrown under the bus to preserve more lucrative partnerships? The questions were explosive, and the WTA had no good answers. Meanwhile, Eala remained silent. Her social media accounts stayed dark. Her team continued to decline interview requests, but those close to her described a young woman who was heartbroken, confused, and feeling utterly abandoned by the organization she had once trusted. The WTA had failed her, and everyone knew it. But Alex Eala wasn't going to stay silent forever. And when she finally spoke, her words would shake the entire tennis world. Here's what she said. In the months following Alex Eala's emotional statement, the landscape of women's tennis shifted in ways no one could have predicted. Some sponsors did return. Not all, but enough to signal that public opinion had swung in Eala's favor. A major athletic brand that had initially distanced itself quietly resumed their partnership. releasing a statement about second chances and supporting resilient athletes. It was a PR move, of course, but it was also a recognition that Eala's fan base was too powerful to ignore. But other sponsors never came back. The luxury brands, the high-end endorsements, they moved on to safer bets, to players with less controversial pasts. Eala's earning potential took a hit. Industry analysts estimated she lost between $15 and $20 million in endorsement income. For a young player still building her career, it was a devastating blow. Yet Eala persevered. She competed in tournaments, won matches, and slowly began to rebuild her public image. Her play on the court was as fierce as ever, perhaps even more so. There was a new edge to her game, a determination born from adversity. Fans noticed, commentators noticed, and gradually, the narrative began to shift once again, from scandal to redemption. The WTA, meanwhile, faced its own reckoning. Several high-ranking executives quietly resigned in the wake of the controversy. The organization announced sweeping reforms, including new privacy protections for players, mandatory mental health support, and a restructured crisis response team. They partnered with advocacy groups and hired consultants to overhaul their player relations policies. But skeptics questioned whether these changes were genuine or merely cosmetic. Former players remained critical, arguing that the WTA's track record spoke for itself. Trust, once broken, is not easily repaired. And for many in the tennis community, the damage to the WTA's reputation was permanent. The leaked video itself became a case study in privacy law and digital ethics. Legal experts debated who was responsible and what recourse victims of similar leaks had. Eala's legal team pursued multiple avenues, filing lawsuits against websites that hosted the video and investigating the source of the leak. Progress was slow, but the message was clear. She was fighting back. Perhaps most significantly, Eala's story sparked a broader conversation about the treatment of young female athletes, the double standards, the exploitation, the impossible expectations. Her courage in speaking out inspired others to share their own experiences. A movement was forming, one that demanded accountability, respect, and systemic change. As for Eala herself, she remains focused on her career. She's training harder than ever, preparing for the next season, and setting her sights on Grand Slam titles. She's older now, not in years, but in experience. She's learned hard lessons about fame, trust, and the price of being in the public eye. In a recent interview, she was asked if she had any regrets. She paused, considered the question, and then said, "I regret that it happened. I regret the pain it caused, but I don't regret speaking out, because if I stayed silent, nothing would change. And maybe, just maybe, my story can help the next young player who faces something like this." It was a powerful moment, a reminder that even in the darkest scandals, there can be growth, resilience, and hope. The tennis world is still watching Eala. Some are rooting for her comeback, others are waiting for her next misstep. But one thing is certain, she will not be forgotten. Her story is now part of the sport's history, a cautionary tale and an inspiration all at once. And as the WTA continues to navigate the fallout, one question lingers. Will they learn from this? Will they truly change? Or will the next crisis reveal the same failures, the same priorities, and the same willingness to sacrifice their players for profit?